touched on in the teleconference, but I think it's 7 of the 17 games you played have been 1 basket or less. Have there been anything that you can say now your team is better at doing this in those late game situations?
Well, when you live in that world, I think you become accustomed to living in that world, for better or for worse. And I think through 17 games, we've established some things as to who we are, and we're going to play in a lot of close games. So we need to learn to be comfortable in the chaos. That's how I describe it. That's one of the things that, again, when you have upperclassmen in your backcourt, when you got a fifth-year senior in Marshall and you've got a 3-year starter who's logged more minutes than anybody in our current program in Jarvis, those guys have to lead and they have to play with poise and they have to make game-winning plays down the stretch. And we've been fortunate in the last 2 games for us to make enough plays to survive some other things that we are not doing as well that we've got to continue to work on.
Do you attribute that to being more comfortable in the chaos, that some of the games that perhaps 3, 4, 5 weeks ago you lost, now you're finding a way to win, or is it just chance?
Well, I think it's a little more than chance. I think we're making enough plays. I think we're doing the things that we need to do to put ourselves in a position to win those games. And then because we've been through this so much, I just see us playing with a little bit more poise now. The last 90 seconds at South Carolina, save for that, we probably played about as well for 15, 16 minutes in the second half as we have all year on the road. We did some uncharacteristic things, missing free throws, a couple of fouls, a couple of questionable decisions here and there. But overall, I think this team is growing. And when you see a guy like Anthony Perez step up in a crunch time situation, really for the first time in his college career, the game before, Sebas stepping up in crunch time for the first time in his college career, AJ getting a double-double against LSU, a formidable front line for the first time in his college career. That's what we have to remember. These guys are playing expanded roles. They're asked to do much more in crunch time against good teams, and for them to have some success, hopefully it garners some real confidence in them as we move forward.
Marshall shot at the end of regulation last year at Vanderbilt. Any kind of play there? Was that coaching, or was that just throwing into him?
Well, we didn't call a timeout, and I think we got the ball in the guy's hand that we wanted. I give Jarvis more credit than I would give anyone else because he was the one that didn't panic, and he got Marshall where at least he was square to the basket and knocked down a big shot in a crazy game. As we're preparing for him, I always go back to the last time we were in that venue, and they hit a Memorial Gym record number of threes, and it was one after another after another after another, and for us to withstand that and still find a way to win and continue to garner some momentum last year, and our 6-0 start was huge.
How big was that shot and that win for Marshall and the team the rest of the way last year?
Well, it was one game, but honestly, it was probably the jump off of this phenomenon that's continued, 365 days later, this Marshall-Henderson phenomenon. It was kind of the jump off for that, and I think that was closely followed up, I guess, when we go and win at Auburn and the jersey popping, and then this thing kind of took on a life of its own.
Is there any? You talk about being so accustomed to playing close games. Was there anything tangible, anything you put your finger on as to what, hey, we're doing this better now to help us pull out these close games than we were, in the non-conference earlier in the season?
Well, save for again a couple down the stretch. Jarvis's 2 big free throw misses, and Marshall missed one down the stretch. We're making free throws at a higher rate in league play than we were otherwise. I think we're coming up with enough stops. We lost 3 non-league games with our inability to get the stop down the stretch, and we're coming back off back-to-back. LSU had the ball to win it at the buzzer. We got the stop to get to overtime where we were able to get the separation. And then even though there was only 2 seconds left, South Carolina had the ball with a chance to win the game on Saturday, and for us to be able to get those stops, hopefully, again, it'll breed some confidence from within.
And Nashville was good to you guys last year, not only from the Vanderbilt game, but the SEC tournament. Do you think about that some when you head up there? Or?
I don't think about it at all. I know that if we could play in Bridgestone Arena, which if Kevin would be obliged to do so, I'd love to move the game out of Memorial. That's a hard gym to play. And Marshall made an incredible shot last year, and we fought back from a big second half deficit to win that game. But that's a tough place to play, not only with the benches where they are, and it's so unusual. The next 2 days in practice, I'm really going to try, and it's not easy for me because there's so many things that we're doing wrong. And as a coach, you won't ebb and flow in practice, but if you don't stop and correct, sometimes you miss 3 or 4 things that need to be corrected. But I'm going to really try to be cognizant of the fact that this is really a player's game more so than any other you play, especially when the game's away from you. Offensively, it's away from you. I don't want them having to look back and listen for me. We've got to run our team down there offensively, and then in the second half, probably the most frustrating thing is when the defense is away from you, and and their offense will be right in front of Kevin. And again, if history is any indicator, it's going to be a close game, and that's where guys have to take ownership of the team more so in this game than any other.
They had a funky week last week. What do you make of their team right now?
They've had a bunch of injuries. It's really eaten into his depth. But sometimes, and we went through this, if you guys remember, my first year we didn't play a lot of guys. I had 3 seniors, and they knew they were going to play, and they kind of embraced their role and ended up having a good season. And then my third year when we had all the injuries, there's something to be said, though, when you play 7 or 8 guys. Those guys know they're going to play. They're playing with a great deal of confidence. I think their perimeter is really, really good. And they're playing Rod Odom, who's always hurt us as a stretch 4. Now they're playing him really predominantly at the 3 simply because they have some backcourt issues, which creates size problems for us. He's 6'9", he's long, and he can make shots. So it's a very concerning game for me, as they all are. We know who we are. Our margin for error is not great, and I've got great respect for Kevin. They don't lose many games in that building. It's going to be a difficult challenge. We know that, regardless of what the numbers say. It's another challenge for our group.
Where do you think Anthony is with this game right now?
My hope is it's the first time in college. He's had moments. He had a big shot last year at Vandy, if you remember. It kind of started our run. And he's had moments where he's really helped us. He's never had a game like that in college. In that environment, with those stakes, to make those plays. My hope is that he can now exhale and know, hey, if I play this way, I can be successful and really help this team. And it was huge for us. When Derek Millinghouse didn't have his best game, Snoop didn't have his best game. Marshall goes 4 for 17 last year in a 1-point loss. He goes 5 for 17 this year. I'm sure Frank would take 9 for 34 out of him. It wasn't like he played lights out. We got foul trouble everywhere. AJ fouls out in 15 minutes. Sebas fouls out in 15 minutes. Bear fouls out in 29 minutes. Anthony's got 4 fouls. And we needed different guys to step up. Snoop didn't play very well. 1 for 7, looked a little lethargic. Anthony Perez stepped up, made huge plays for us, and it enabled us to get a road win, which are difficult to get.
Sometimes Anthony, when he comes in, looks like he's trying to make 100 plays a minute in order to stay on the court.
Sure.
Is he slowing down a little bit?
I hope so. I think a lot of guys, and it's not just my team, it's most teams, a lot of guys, especially when they're young, they think the way to stay on the floor is to make shots. That's not his role with his team. Now, he made some the other night, and thank goodness he did, but I thought he was much more efficient. He doesn't need to go out and hunt shots. I started Martavius Newby in the second half, and honestly, I thought it was just a gut feel. I felt like we were being out-toughed in the first half, and I feel like he's one of our toughest kids, and I wanted him to get in there and make something happen. And defensively, he came up with a couple of steals and a couple of back tips, and you look up, and it didn't take us 7, 8, 9 minutes to get back in the game. At the first media timeout, we were back in the game. And I think a lot of that was attributed to Newby and the energy that he brought us. So with him and Anthony stepping up in lieu of the other guys that I said did not have their best game, that is truly the essence of a team. And for me, being at this stage in the season and getting contributions from a number of different guys, it's where I'm the most encouraged.
Do you think Anthony can, because you talk so much about Snoop, you want him to step up and be that third scorer. Do you think Anthony can carry some of that load, be some of that secondary scoring?
I think it's pretty obvious now who we are. I think Jarvis Summers needs to continue to be steady and play like an all-league guy. I need Marshall to be Marshall. I need him to make shots. I need him to try to be efficient. I need him to guard with a sense of urgency like he's trying to play with. I need him to help us on the glass. I need to get something off of our bench out of Derek Millinghouse, Martavius Newby, Anthony Perez, Snoop White, whoever that other starter is. We need, out of those 4 guys, I got to get a couple of them to contribute. And then our front line, we're doing it by committee. AJ and Sebas, I think, have played their way through some separation. We're getting some quality minutes out of Dwight Colby. Bear, I thought, was big force down the stretch, coming up with a couple of plays. The foul call on the three-pointer. You guys were watching it on TV, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know. It is what it is. And then he made a big block at the end. So his presence is being felt, and he's another guy that's never been in this role before. So we are growing up a little bit. Hopefully that'll continue.
Andy, you got State coming up later this week. Do you like, not just them, but any team, playing them so close together in all the schedule?
We get our SEC schedule, I get it emailed to me, and it is what it is. I don't get a vote. It's odd. I don't know why it would have to be that way, but it is what it is. We had Tennessee last year, if you remember, where we opened with them, and I think we played them the 3rd or 4th game, and, I don't really think about it, and I won't think about it at Mississippi State until Thursday.
Are you guys better in a couple of games under your belt now in terms of just cutting off those lanes, cutting off drives, penetration, things like that?
I hope so. I hope so. We weren't very good in Starkville, and most especially against one kid who made more free throws than we shot as a team. And that's a recipe for disaster, and that's what happened.
3-1 through the first 4 SEC games. Knowing you weren't going to have Marshall the first 2, is this about what you expected to be? Are you happy with 3-1 through the
It's
first 4?
easy, and I'm not saying I don't do it, but I try not to do it. It doesn't. It's not. It has no value to me to sit there and try to speculate. I think if last year proved anything to all of us, is speculation is futile. It's y'all's business. It's not my business. For me, I try to live what I try to teach these guys. I don't want you to think about anything except Wednesday night against Vanderbilt. Let's prepare ourselves to go in there and give it a shot. I've come to think, and I've come to learn, honestly, maybe the hard way, that we may be big picture thinkers, they're not. And that's all that matters to me is what they're doing. So we're going to just focus on the moment and try to live right there as best we can.
Thanks, Coach.